Glad my kids aren't driving in it.
Call this meeting to order. This is the October 25th School Committee meeting, Wareham School Committee. And the meeting is being recorded and broadcast by WCTV, and Mrs. Ruiz is making an audio recording. I would like at this time to turn the meeting over to Chairwoman Mary Morgan.
I would like to take a few minutes to remember a colleague and friend, Robin Canberra, who passed away suddenly on October 9th. Robin worked in Wareham Public Schools for over 30 years. He touched the hearts and minds of many students he had the pleasure of knowing throughout his tenure, not only as a staff member, but also as student council advisor and a volunteer chaperone for dances, countless field trips, and ski excursions. Robin had a great sense of humor and was fun to be around. He also had a knack for building relationships. Students knew that he was sincere in his wanting them to succeed. Robin transformed his own love for shopping into building up the middle school store, allowing opportunities for students to learn responsibility in working there, as well as others a chance to earn some goodies by modeling exemplary behavior. Inevitably, when Robin would walk down the street, kids and those who are now adults would yell from cars as they rode by, "Hi, Mr. Canberra, hey, Mr. Canberra, Canberra!" A true testimony to the many relationships that he built. Robin was a thoughtful, contributing member of the staff. Working with a middle school team, he was always ready to give feedback on a student's progress. He was a tireless union representative and an excellent listener who offered sound advice to his colleagues. Robin was quick to laugh or break out in song. He had many very close friends within the district. I would be remiss in not mentioning Robin's thoughtfulness in keeping the staff ready to work, with his forever arriving to school early, making coffee, and keeping the soda machine well stocked. Even on the bleakest, darkest, rawest, rainiest Friday mornings, everyone knew that there would be hot coffee and Mars donuts waiting in the staff room, thanks to Robin. Rest in peace, Mr. Canberra, and thank you for all you brought to Wareham Public Schools.
Thank you, Mary.
And now we'll have the moment of silence. Thank you. Is there anyone who'd like to come for public comment this evening?
Good evening. My name is Brian Fitzgerald. I'm a 5th grade humanities teacher and the president of the Wareham Education Association.
Michelle LaFrancois, kindergarten teacher at Deacon's and PR and our chairperson for the WEA.
I have something to share with you, but first of all, Mrs. Morgan, thank you for that memorial of Robin Canberra. Any of us who worked with him were fortunate. And also, before I get to it, I was just speaking to some of my colleagues at Deacon's, and I'd like to take the opportunity to say that I'm lucky to speak with so many educators at Deacon's, and I have heard such wonderful things from this school year. Not just talking with them, but seeing them talk about what they're doing with their students and with each other. There's an energy and a feeling that there are open roads ahead that I haven't seen in that school in a while, and it's been wonderful to hear. She doesn't want me to tell this story, but I was in the gym today at Deacon's in a conversation, and I saw a custodian bringing in the front end of a table for Red Ribbon Awareness Day. And Mrs. Chandler was bringing in the back half. Leadership isn't sitting in an office. It's showing that there is no work that is beneath you, and there's no person who's beneath you. And when I saw Mrs. Chandler getting her hands dirty, I knew that building was in a great place. And every time I talk to someone at Deacon's, I hear the same thing. I do want to share a letter. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to give it to Chair Caporiccio. To the leaders of the Wareham Public Schools, we, the undersigned, are writing with great concern about the low availability of substitute teachers throughout the Wareham Public Schools. Too often in the recent past, there has been an impact on the education of Wareham students due to this issue. The causes of this shortage are many. Scheduling of mandatory meetings and training for staff when students are present. The low pay of substitute teachers relative to other districts, and health and safety issues causing staff absences, to name a few. This shortage has led to a clear negative impact across our district. Classes have been combined into large groups. A lack of oversight causes bathrooms to be declared off limits to students for extended periods of time, and special education staff are assigned to other classes, which deprives their students of the help they need and to which they have a legal right. Often the substitutes we do hire are soon overwhelmed and do not return. As educators, we ask the district to employ some effort and resources to resolve this issue so that our students can receive the education they deserve. This letter is signed by 181 educators of the Wareham Public Schools. We understand this is on the agenda tonight, and we hope it will lead to some productive conversations to fix this problem.
Thank you very much. We will address it this evening. The minutes of the meeting, October 11th. If you all agree that there are no changes to be made, would someone make a motion to accept that agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
500. Next, we will have the reports of the business manager. Mr. MacMilan, come on down.
Good evening, school committee. So I've got 3 documents to discuss this evening. The first is the monthly expenditure report through to the end of September. So I will give you a short introduction. It does, although the comparison to last year looks very favourable, that's largely because there had been fewer school days and fewer payrolls by the end of September last year than this year, just when we started earlier. So actually, if you include the most recent payroll, we'd be much kind of in the same ballpark as we were last year. Slightly more money, but slightly lower percentage. I mean, and that sort of is reflected throughout the report. There's a couple of other points I would just draw to your attention. I've provided notes on previous transfers or any other information that might be helpful. We had previously discussed the legal services function, and I've just provided some information about how that's split between regular ed and special ed legal services, with special ed taking the bulk of that. There's also been some changes to the chart of accounts by DESE, so just the groups and by which we report, and so I've consolidated some of the functions and plan to come to the policy review committee in order to update our chart of accounts. And that's it really. I have a couple of transfers to request, but before I get into that, are there any questions on the report itself?
I just have a question about the student transportation services.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure how this was broken down, so I'm reading it correctly. I understand that student transportation services, the first part, are those that's just the regular buses that come back and forth to our public schools, and then it says pupil services under that. Is that for the out-of-district transportation for students?
So, pupil services is the overall category, and transportation is one function within that.
Okay.
So the other
The other
functions,
the other areas that were on the page before that are added into that final total amount.
the ones in the previous page, yes, they're all
Yes.
part of that. So athletic services and so on are all
So when
part.
we talk about student transportation services, we're talking about transportation for every student in Wareham, no matter where they're going to school.
Yes, to and from school though, that's all. So it doesn't include like field trips
Oh,
or
I
anything else.
understand
but
that.
Just to
I
and from school.
understand that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
While we're on transportation, I understand that the 4-day difference
Yep.
is having an impact, and that makes perfect sense. And by the way, your notes, as usual, cut down on questions. So we aren't to conclude that you don't like getting questions, are you? That
No,
your
I
notes
just
are
like
so good?
providing information.
But I focused in on the 30,000. Does that mean that we could have a 30,000 plus variance throughout the year within all other things being equal, which they never are?
30,000 variance, well,
That's real, in other words. That's not a function of the fewer days.
so far, I mean,
So
it's
far.
really, yes. So if there are, if students come in or change, then that will have impact on that.
Right, but
Total,
so
but
far, we have a true 30,000 favorable
A
after a very short
Well, we
period of
have,
time.
yes, although we spent more than the amount so what we budgeted, it's in line with what we've budgeted for this year. So it's less than last year, but we budgeted less than last year, than we ended up spending last year.
Well, I understand, but okay, so how much of that 6% difference between the two are the fewer days?
The majority of it at this point.
I guess I'm grasping, but you're not
Yeah.
giving, your goal isn't to never give hope, is it?
Yes, that is my, yeah. Essentially, I want to be as bleak as possible.
Okay,
I mean, I just think,
I'll keep trying, though.
yeah, so, I mean, I'm reluctant to be drawn just because with transportation, especially, I mean, there is a portion of transportation which is perfectly predictable because we've got to get students to school 180 days. But then there is the out-of-district transportation and homeless transportation, which is much more variable and can change day to day.
Now, just to be clear, we have a lot more newer buses than we used to, say,
Yes.
3 or 4 years ago. But the benefits of that are in fact accruing to the town, correct?
Well, no, I mean, we do see a reduction in our maintenance. So the way it works with the town is
Yeah, exactly. How is it working with the town?
so essentially when they do work on a specific bus, so if a bus needs a new exhaust, we pay for that.
Parts and labor?
Parts. We also pay for 2 mechanics.
Okay.
So essentially what happened a couple of years ago was we agreed with the town that they would take on maintenance of the bus fleet. And as part of that, we moved over from our budget 2 mechanics. So we continue.
Right, but that's fixed, meaning if we buy more parts than anticipated, it actually costs us.
Yeah.
But they won't suddenly charge us for 2.5 mechanics if there's a
No.
lot of repairs.
No.
Conversely, if the buses don't break down much, they will benefit because they've got
They
2
won't have to
mechanics who are
work.
not as busy as anticipated.
Yes, that is true. But we will also have fewer parts to pay for.
Okay, thank you.
All right. That-
Does anyone,
I just have a couple of questions. The first one is, I noticed with the legal services that it's increased by half, it looks
Yeah.
like. So are you concerned at all that we're not going to be able to continue get through the year with?
So there was a lot of negotiations ongoing last year, which I'm hoping is going to help, and a couple of critical special ed cases which had been going on for a long time, which have been concluded. So that's given me some hope, but it is definitely an area I'm watching closely.
Okay. And then also with the going back to the transportation, is it possible to get a breakdown of what is out-of-district costing, what's homeless costing, what's in-district costing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then my last question is, when do you anticipate opening the POs for out-of-district? Because I noticed that it doesn't look like anything's been opened yet.
So, they're just when, so basically as students are placed and then agreements are we have placed students and we come to agreements and we
Right.
send out contracts and we get the contract signed, then we create the purchase order. So there's just that lag time between the work getting done and the placement being finalised and the purchase order being created. So I know the special ed department are working hard on getting that done, and they have started. Actually, a lot have started to come through in the last few weeks. They're just not before the end of September.
Okay.
Another quick question, Michael. The town meeting thankfully approved the McKinney-Vento money
Yes.
for us. I think it was about $24,000,
Yeah.
as I recall.
Yes.
What percentage of our actual cost did that 24,000 represent?
A tiny percentage of our overall cost.
No.
Of-
What percentage of the actual
Homeless-
cost of transporting the homeless
Homeless
students?
uh,
Approximately.
He doesn't do approximate.
I'm going. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
to
gonna
the
say
nearest
like-
dollar, you know.
Yeah, let's think. So it's about. I think we spent about $130,000 on homeless. I'm guessing.
So Suzanne
So-
Bump, the state auditor, who said it was an unfunded mandate and it should be fully reimbursed, it isn't quite happening, is it?
No.
So 130 versus 24.
Yeah, but don't hold me to that.
No, I
will
won't, but
get
that's
well, I will when I come next.
That's the
time, I'll
order of
provide-
magnitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
All right, so thank you very much. So I have two transfers to request. One is we have a couple of teaching positions which are currently being filled by long-term substitutes. So and these are positions where the person has left. So we had budgeted for that position as a teacher salary, but it has been, and we don't have to pay for it, and it is now being filled by a substitute. So I'd like to move the money over from the teacher salary line to the substitute line to pay for it, because I have that saving in my teacher line and my cost in the substitute line.
Does that mean that we've given up finding a permanent person? Is that why we have a substitute?
So I
We don't
believe,
have an
well,
educator?
in
Yeah.
one position there is somebody coming, but it's not there yet, and in the other one it looks like it's going to be more longer term than that. Well, we've not been able to find someone to fill it.
So if somebody's coming, don't you still need the money?
Well, for one, I've only budgeted
Oh,
the
okay.
portion that we need, because it's only $48,000, so it's not full salaries, it's
Okay.
only the portions of the years which we expect to have a long-term sub for.
Okay. Are there any?
Just curious, did these teachers leave at the beginning of this year, or was it from last year and they just haven't been filled, or?
I believe it's both were very, very early or, recent, well, obviously before now, but this year, so I've just not been able to fill them.
Okay.
And then the
Okay.
second transfer I'm requesting is just another housekeeping one where there's been some update to the state chart of accounts. It's clarified how school resource officers should be categorised. So I just want to move the money from attendance and parent liaison services into school security. So it's no change in budget or expenditure, just moving it into their correct function.
Move approval?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 500.
Right, thank you very much. So for my last item is the budget development timeline for next year's budget. So we've just, this is the same form as we used last time, just to give an outline of the key dates in this upcoming budget process. A lot of the budget development is front-loaded between now and Christmas, and then that because we have to get our school committee approved budget to the town administrator by early January, and timing of meetings is such that it generally means we have to get it done by Christmas. So we have already been out in touch with the principals, and they are developing their budget requests. They are due back by November 1st. And we also met this morning with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee to discuss the budget and our plan. We have our first budget presentation to school committee planned for November 15th, the all-day budget workshop for the 20th, and that is when our directors and principals will present their budgets in a kind of longer format, and that is open. It's a public meeting, it's open. We will send out if we haven't already, actually sent out invitations to FinCom and the Selectmen. And then there is the actual public hearing, and again, the FinCom and Selectmen will be there for a joint meeting. That's December 6th, before we take a vote, December 20th, and we can then send off the budget to the Town Administrator. So, if there's any questions on that process?
I hope that when we have the public information period, that we do have, you know, the selectmen there, the FinCom, or our all-day budget meeting. I hope that we have a good response for the other town departments to be with us to hear what it's like from the ground up, so that we all are on the same page and have a good understanding of what the needs are, what the obstacles are, and how we can all work together as a town and continue to work together.
Given the success of ice cream socials, I'm wondering if we should serve ice cream at the public hearing.
I'll do a spaghetti dinner if they want. That's it. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
As usual, the information that you give is explained so well that
Thank you. Thanks.
we appreciate it. Next. The report on the school improvement plan, survey data, goals, and MCAS results. Dr. Schwamb.
We'd also like to invite the principals to join Dr. Schwamb at the table. Tonight, we are going to be sharing with you strategic plan information, the survey data that was taken last year, our goals, and our MCAS results. The format will take you through each school. You were given a packet on Friday, I believe. So at this point, I'll turn this over to Dr. Schwamb, and she will then walk you through the process.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for indulging us in this journey that we've embarked upon. Really, the goal of this is to provide you with the information that we collect over long periods of time and hopefully come up with some action steps to address the information and through the survey data. We've also thought that the best way to do this in the future, in order to accommodate the WPS 2021 strategic plan, which was approved April of 2016, just for those of you that weren't on the committee at the time. I think it's good information to have, is that we would like to use the last meeting in October to do precisely this process that we're doing tonight. So we would review our goals from the previous year, indicate the steps that we've taken, share with you the same data or the same questions that we gather from parents and faculty surveys, as well as any other data we have, including any formative assessment data and MCAS data. And then, as we look at all of those elements, create our plan for the next year and share that with you at that time. So essentially, the pattern of this report is hopefully going to stay very similar. It will become habit. You'll be able to understand what's coming and why it's there and the purpose of that. But all of the documents follow a pattern, and it starts with the district. It's the overview of the strategic plan in a 10-page document, basically put into a page and a half, with some essential questions that we are looking at and pondering as we move through this process. It then moves into the goals of central office. Central office met and creates the goals initially. We look at those goals and assess where we are in relationship to those goals. Central office decided to maintain the same goals because they're rather broad and there are a lot of elements to that. We've each taken apart and reported out on our progress. The schools have done the same with their goals. The next, we'll be looking at the parent survey data, and then the faculty survey data, then the data we gather about the strategic plan from faculty, where they think they are in the process. And then we create our goals for the upcoming year, which we presented to you in June through a PowerPoint presentation. I used some of the same pictures as a way to identify that, so that it was familiar to you. And what's also included in this is how the strategic plan is connected to the teacher evaluation rubric that's created by the Wareham Public Schools, and what they anticipate will happen in each of the subsequent categories that we address as we teach day to day. And the purpose for that is to keep this strategic plan alive. The purpose of getting the information from faculty at the close of the year is to keep it alive, to keep it as part of their everyday language, and to use this tool so that it doesn't sit on a shelf and collect dust like every other strategic plan I've ever been involved with. So I hope that was given out. It was pared down, related to the goals chosen by each subsequent school and their school councils for their goals, and how that relates to the teacher evaluation initiative, so that teachers, when they did write their goal that was connected to the school improvement plan, they had this document in front of them, and it's hopefully was helpful to them with the language that they needed. As you can see on the front, there were many contributors to this process. It was a lengthy process, a worthwhile process, a sobering process in many ways. We spent a lot of time in deep thought about what we needed to do and how we were to proceed, and the actions that we have created thus far are solid, well-planned, and extremely thoughtful. No one has taken this information lightly. I believe that every leader in the district has embraced it. Just so that you're aware, the survey data came from a vetted process. So when you create a survey, you have to make sure that the questions are as unbiased as possible. And those questions were created externally. After a period of years, those questions were then vetted. We took those questions for the parents and the faculty survey so that they would not create bias, so that we could get the best data, statistically significant, and use that data to move ahead. We started this process, got approval from the union. As a result, we shared all this information. They approved the questions, and we started the survey last year. So this year, we had 2 years' worth of data that we felt was at least statistically significant questions, the same questions in a format around the same time given, so that we could gather that information to really figure out where we were. So just so that you're aware of that process. And with that, and the surveys were given out. They were created May 5th, 2017, around the same time, May 4th, 2016, and the staff and parents. There's a process with parents. We send it out 3 times. Very grateful. We had 300 parents respond, which was a large number comparatively from the year before, and we will continue on with that process. And we close the survey June 12th and 13th, depending upon the year that we gave it of the 2 years. So it follows a pretty tight process, and it's on purpose, intentional, that way. So without further ado, would you like to begin with the leadership of the schools? Unless somebody has any questions before we begin? All right.
Thank you, Dr. Schwamb. Thank you, school committee. I'd like to thank the staff that's here tonight. I have quite a diverse representation of Deacon's School there. Each grade, I have paraprofessionals, I have a specialist, and I have a secretary. So I want to say thank you for our support to assistant principals as we begin this process. Thank you, school committee. I'm going to begin with some action steps that were taken for 2016-2017 from page 18. I'm just going to highlight the points of if it's okay with you. I don't want to read it to you, but in the idea of the goal was promoting student creativity and their ability to collaborate, communicate, and think critically through open-ended, inquiry-based learning. In reflecting on this, the action step said data will be attained through teacher observation. Criteria will be established ahead of time, and data regarding the amount of times observed, engaged, and the above will be collected. So, in looking at this goal, at this time when this goal was written prior to me being assistant principal even, I think probably in June of 2016, I came on board as assistant principal. So I'm looking at this from my perspective as assistant principal and what we did and the information that the assistant principals we have here, Ms. Gibbs and Ms. Russo, shared with me. We collected a lot of data, especially on assessments, as you know, from some of the input that you received from last year. With DRAs in kindergartens, we made some adequate gains there, part due to the implementation of differentiated literacy interventions and the phonics program foundations. We also brought Focus K2 into full implementation, which was an inquiry-based program, and have had a lot of success with student communication and collaboration. In the goal area, it says that it's that we're going to engage in the above will be collected. I think that, maybe I'm speaking to this, but we also talked about collecting student work as pieces, and you'll see that in the student survey. It went the staff survey, that it went down, and with Focus K2 and in other components, that's an area we need to look at, is collecting student work as a collection. So we have these exemplary pieces. Okay. Further criteria, I'm just highlighting some of the other points to it on the next page, 19. And this is what I'm speaking to now. Further criteria, including rubrics and collected student work as exemplars, will prove to be talking points to the students. We have not done that yet, and I've highlighted it, and it will be accomplished. Are there any questions on the action steps with that first goal? All right. To the second goal, speaking of 2016, 2017, it says increase student and staff access to technology to create organic, authentic, formative assessments to gather student data to inform instruction. Was the goal there? We have definitely increased student and staff access to technology. And as the action step, it says data will be obtained by evaluators to determine frequency of use of technology. Data will be continued to be collected and assessed through FAST, which we did. Student work will be collected and celebrated. That's something I think we need to work on. We put a lot of work out there on bulletin boards. We do showcase a lot. But I think that there is some exemplary work that we can still broadcast out there. For that, data was collected and used to determine, we had 100% last year, grade 2 with the Chromebooks. They were used all the time, every day, especially through the math program in grade 2. We also really began, thanks to a lot of training in Google, that we've started Google Forms, and teachers have begun using Google Forms. I used Google Forms due to the training that we were receiving for PD, and it's been an excellent tool to gather information from staff, and I'll talk to that when it comes to PBIS and what we're working on as a school, per se. If I have a question, I ask usually through a Google form, which has been highly effective, and the technology there has been very useful. In the final goal here, it says leadership will develop shared responsibility for commitment to the vision and mission of engaging all stakeholders in meaningful ways. Provide community outreach opportunities, create a social media presence, monthly community service projects for students, invite volunteers from community. I felt Deacon's School really did a sensational job of this last year for 2016, 2017. When I came on board at Deacon's, I was in awe of the amount of evenings we had, and I have them all listed here, but each specialist had an evening celebrated where they welcomed the community and families. There were just so many opportunities for the community to be engaged at Deacon's School, and I have it listed there. Are there any questions to that? All right.
I just have one
yes,
question.
Judy, go ahead.
You spoke on the bottom of page 20 about collecting data on the effectiveness of PBIS.
Yes,
Could you talk a little bit about what you're going to be doing this year
absolutely.
in that area?
Absolutely. I'm so excited about that, and I do have a teacher representative who would speak to it, too. We have really, I feel, improved the PBIS team. They are on board. I've stepped back a bit from my mission, just being the principal. They just give me feedback, because one of our goals in our SIP is to have a shared vision. And I have to say the PBIS team has brought it on all themselves. We have weekly initiatives that we do. We have like tickets we give away. We just do giveaways for checking students, you know, if they're walking down the hallways quietly with their peace and quiet signs up. We have a monthly initiative where we're having a Golden Book Award given out. It's like Student of the Month. We have a daily pledge that I say every single morning, and I'm going to soon have a contest on that for a student to say it. And we are using common language. This year, the leadership team, we created a binder, the John W. Deacon Elementary Staff Notebook, and in it has a whole PBIS section for teachers, so we can implement common language practices, and the PBIS team can speak to it greatly. I know Ms. Bakeman has some notes she'd like to speak to. Mr. Paling's there. He's on the PBIS team. We've just done some sensational things. Most recently, we just had a survey completed on the 24th, created by Ms. Tricker. Jackie Tricker's a special ed teacher. She's on the PBIS team. And she asked the staff feedback about what's happening in PBIS. Everything from the morning pledge to our weekly incentive program to our common language, our common words, the lessons that we're doing. And so we got a lot of staff feedback. Discipline was part of it. And we got a lot of feedback that was very positive in regards to what's happening. And I can share that.
Well, I didn't want to call a lot of people
Yeah.
to stop
No,
this
no.
presentation.
No, I don't want to stop either.
I just wanted to hear a little bit about it
Oh,
this
yeah.
evening, and
It's-
some other time, I would love to hear more about how it's
Absolutely.
going, what it's about.
We can do that, definitely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll be here all night.
Yes.
Because I get
No,
really
it's
excited.
my
so-
question could be an all-night question. I just wanted to let you know. Thank
No.
you for the information.
Absolutely.
Does anyone have any questions?
Okay. Oh, Mary, I apologize.
That's all right. That's okay. So actually, just going back to page 19, I just have a clarifying question on, so in kindergarten, the FAST is not given, is that correct?
Oh, it is given.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Because the way
Every
it's
single
worded, it
student.
sounds like it's just DRA.
Yeah, we use the DRA as a measure in that particular area.
We give FAST K through 8.
Okay. All right. And then one other question I have, where I noticed about the SSC team gathering data and meeting on 84 student referrals. Have you collected any data on whether or not special ed referrals have gone down?
That is a good question. I do know that our SSCs do happen regularly on every Monday through Ms. Russo. We don't have, that's a really great question, Mary, to Ms. Russo. I don't have that data in particular. I do know that Ms. Russo has had 41 SSC meetings as of today.
As of today?
This year.
Okay.
Yep, from the first day of school to October 25th, Ms. Russo has had 41 SSC meetings.
Do you know whether it's in certain grades or if it's pretty equal in all grade levels coming from grades?
Ms. Russo, can you estimate that for more K? I was going to say,
All right.
our K population would be the highest.
Okay.
For clarification, SSC is Student Support Council. And those are for students who are, struggling in some way in the classroom, be it academically, social, emotional, occupational, wherever the teacher sees that need. So the team gets together and discusses interventions that can take place.
Anyone else?
Okay, we're going to go through the parent surveys and then the staff survey for last year. And this is eye-opening. I received this data. We received it last June. I had just come on board as the interim principal, and I took notice to it right away because I was invested in it. I look at data and we make decisions based on data. So I take this very seriously because I do know that DECUS went down in several areas. And when I see that, we need to make change. And that's why I looked to the current school improvement plan to make those changes. So I looked to this data first to create the school improvement plan for 2017-2018. Are there any particular questions you have in regards to the parent survey? Yeah.
First, thank you all for being here, including your team. I noticed in 2016, the highest score was does someone in the school know your student, know my child, excuse me, okay? And while that's still relatively high, it's shifted now. The highest score is, do they feel safe coming to school? Which I was really pleased to see that the transportation service is making parents feel good.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real plus. And the good news is the other score remained relatively high. But unlike like your other colleagues, the lowest score is, have they gotten a phone call from the school about the progress that their child is making? My question is not so much why haven't you made those calls, because I can almost see it as a positive, meaning if there's only good things are happening, perhaps the motivation to make the call doesn't occur. But have we made a commitment to parents that is making them think that they should be getting calls?
I think that regular communication to parents is always important.
But through the phone as compared to?
No. Well, we have
Because this
email.
this question
Yeah.
specifically talks about a phone call.
An email. It includes both.
Oh, it does? My mistake, okay.
And
But
further,
bottom line is the parents are saying they're not getting them.
right, which did surprise me. It's curious because I do know several of our DECUS teachers have apps now, like including Blooms, and that have apps that just clearly communicate readily, daily. And so our teachers are using apps like that, applications that are really 21st century technology. So I was surprised by that too.
So you think it's almost possible that the parents are hitting the delete button too quickly and don't realize they've gotten a communication or something like that?
Maybe that they see our phone on their cell phone too often. I don't know.
It was just a curiosity,
Yeah.
but so in your mind, we're regularly communicating with parents in one form or another, mostly electronic, occasionally with a telephone, but this surprised you as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now on to the staff survey. Here in the staff survey, it also concerned me because I felt we dropped in several areas, and it always puts it, when it says the leadership team, I always take precedent to that because I'm a leader in the building. And I was last year too as assistant principal, so I read it carefully. And I think as strong leaders, what we do and should do well is to look at this data and reflect on it and make the changes necessary to improve. So I did so through the school improvement plan this year, especially through shared vision. One area that we went down on is that I think teachers felt like they weren't listened to or heard. And so I made it a point to make sure that that changed and that our communication became more clear. So we've created subcommittees in our building. We have a daily bulletin that comes out every day. We have myself for morning message every single morning consistently. And we purposefully put walkthroughs in place. And that is part of our shared vision this year. It's my number one priority in that building right now for teacher morale. Questions about that? Mr. Sweat?
I have to say that of all the schools, the results of the professional staff survey for Deacon's was the most concerning. I was also surprised in particular, your other three colleagues got very high marks for innovative teaching. And we've had presentations by Deacon's staff that have been exciting and innovating to me, and yet it was not well regarded by the staff themselves. Does that make sense to you? Because it seems like really good things are happening at Deacon's.
I'm just looking to what question that is, and which,
It was question number
or it's not a question, it's a statement, excuse me, but,
Question number 6. I mean, your other colleagues were in the 90,
oh, in this school, innovative teaching practices are encouraged.
right. And your other colleagues are all in the 90% positive. And so it was a dramatic change from the rest of the district.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I mean, I think we have some of the most innovative teachers at Deacon's School, and I highly advertise that. I think that what we're doing in each grade shows a lot of creativity and maverick, so to speak. Courage, thank you, Dr. Schwamb. We have new programs that are going on that teachers are really taking hold of and embracing and trying, and have the backing, I feel, this year to do so.
But of course, the question actually is not so much is it happening, but is it encouraged? And you have no
Yeah.
doubt, that at least this year it's encouraged.
There are a lot of cheerleaders at Deacon's, yes, this year. You bet.
Okay,
You
thank
bet.
you.
Are there other questions in regards to the staff survey?
I don't know if it's a question as much as a comment, and I have this similar comment that I'm going to have on all the surveys, because I saw certain threads running through them. And I just, put my thoughts into writing when I was looking at everything. And I just thought, when I'm looking at these results of the parent and teacher survey results, I so applaud the progress that's being made. But I was also been made aware of, you have to acknowledge that there are problem areas, and they were noted. So the importance of noting problem areas, because that's why you give surveys, to look at both look at it, the good and the bad, is what are we doing to address the results? What are we doing to move our school forward? Are we having the difficult conversations? Are we developing the action plans that move our system forward? Well, always addressing the concerns, and I feel like that's being done. I heard everything. I was going to ask the question, what are you doing? What's the action plan? But I heard the answers to all those questions, and I just wanted to tell you that I know that. Thank you for answering the question.
Thank you, Judy. And I'm just going to share, and I'm going to end, because discipline is, I care very much for discipline. It's an area where I was a disciplinarian. I was an assistant principal, deals very much with discipline. And yesterday there was a subcommittee on discipline, and no administrator was there. The dean was running the discipline meeting, and she shared the notes. And no administrator was there. And it said, grade 2 communication is good. Joan's visible in the cafe and class. Great that slips go to all teachers. Helpful to know that the parents are being called. Behavior support running like a machine. In past, we felt we had no help. Now we feel like we have the help. Morale is better. People are happier with one admin for each grade, which is just we changed it up a little bit. And it helps with communication because communication is a huge piece that we have now. So I feel that the staff is communicating that. We have data to show the progress we're making for our student improvement plan. We will continue to keep collecting data on this, and we're going to keep the school improvement plan alive. This notebook is right by my side. I have notes in every color to make sure that we are addressing each and every goal we have for this year and making progress from moving from building to transforming. Any other questions?
Yeah.
That's right.
Any questions from Jeff?
You don't have SGPs and all that kind of stuff, but there is an interesting question that the very last question the parents are asked is their child ready for the next level? And in the case of Deacon's, and I assume they mean the next school, but maybe they mean the next grade, I'm not sure, it's not clear to me. Excuse me?
It would depend on who's answering.
Yeah,
If the child is going from second to third or from first
right,
to second.
exactly. But in any event, to me, it's a tremendously important question. And in the parents' case, 20% of the parents, the answer was no. How do you think, what do you think the right answer is? If the parents think that 20% of them think no, what do you think the correct percentage is?
We'll have to look at this year's data. I know that we're working hard to make sure that they are ready to enter the next grade
I have
level.
no doubt that you're working hard. And
Not
that
all
you're-
students will ever all be ready.
I get
Yeah.
that, but do you think it's less than 20, more than 20? Do you think the parents are approximately correct? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but it's a critically important question.
Dr. Schwamb thinks 5. I would say maybe 10%, 8%.
5
Well-
to 10%?
We'll go with 8.
We'll go back to my 90% goal.
Thank you very much.
And that could be speaking to developmentally, not just academically.
I understand.
I also noticed that the number of respondents, there has to be at least 70% more. There were only 78 last year, and this year greater number. We had a greater number of respondents, and that's good that they're responding. I like seeing more. But it might change. It changes things when you have more respondents, too. I hope there's even more next year.
Oh, I have one more follow-up question.
Sure.
I think I remember Dr. Schwamb saying that there's some, I'm sure I'm getting it wrong, but there are some grades, like classrooms that are considered grade 1.5. Is that true, that there are classrooms that are sort of halfway between two grades?
There are students that are halfway between 2 grades.
I understand, but is there any segregation of kids that are sort of in between grades in terms of the ability to perform well and not be frustrated in
Well,
the next level?
Yeah, we have 3 grades, grade K, 1 and 2, but we do flexible groupings. We're open to a lot of ideas. We will move students and wherever they need to
So
be.
you don't have a classroom that you consider 1.5
No, I don't have a...
or
no,
K.5 or something like that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
But what I would also add would be, we have students that they could be in first grade, but because of their ability, we've moved them to second grade in certain areas, so we have that flexibility as well.
I understand.
Yeah.
But does that mean they go from second to third and literally end up skipping a grade?
No, I mean, yeah, we,
Because sometimes the strength is in English,
mhm.
so we'll move them to that class, for example.
Right, does that mean since there's no grade 3 in Deacon's, they're frustrated the next year because they're ready to go on and they,
Oh, no, we differentiate all the time.
okay.
Thank you. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody. So I'll be presenting Minot Forest. So reviewing the goals from the 2016-2017 school year, when you look at the scholarship teaching and learning, we met the goal of implementing the 3 teacher teams. We took a risk last year. We wanted to try something new because what we were doing wasn't working, so we tried it. So we were able to make it work. We made it work with the teachers, with the teams. We made it work with the schedules. However, when we looked at the staff survey for teaming, we knew that we had to change the format because it was too much. So you'll see in the new goal that we have 2 teacher teams this year, and we're finding that to be more effective, and the teachers are enjoying that better. It's better for the teachers, it's also better for the students. We had collaboration time during the day for the teachers where they could talk about curriculum, they looked at the data, content teachers met, so the ELA teachers all met together in the grade level, the math teachers met together in the grade level, the special ed teachers were part of that. The end of the year, we developed a curriculum committee, and we developed several committees with teachers being on these. And they came up with a community-based unit, which was implemented at the beginning of this year. So that has gone over well. We had a scheduling committee that helped with schedules, placement of regular ed students in classrooms. We looked at how many classes we had. We looked at so many variables when we had to place students. And then we had an inclusion committee where we reviewed the data of our special needs students, and they worked to help us properly assign them to the various teams that we have. So we feel that we met the scholarship teaching and learning goal. For the scholarship assessment and accountability, we felt we met that goal. As Dr. Schwamb said, we use FAST 3 times a year, but we can also use it to progress monitor students. And when we look at that data, we have data meetings with the teachers, and then there are reports that are generated and sent home to the families. This school year, and you'll see it in the new goals, we're increasing the progress monitoring because we're doing an intensive intervention period for 5 weeks. So within that 5-week time, we're going to be progress monitoring at least twice for those students who need it. We started with some online assessments because we knew we were heading towards MCAS at the end of the year online. So we started with some practice. This year, all of our assessments will be online in reading and in math. And we also held a writing day where a writing prompt was given. The students were able to do that online, and we assessed it online as well. As Mrs. Chandler said, we also use PBIS. Our staff also have a binder. But what's new to us this year with PBIS is that we're using a program called SWIS. And that's keeping track of the students, the location of where an incident may be happening, the day it happens, the time it happens, the description of the behavior. And we are able to generate these reports easily. So I thank Mrs. Murphy, who's been really inputting all this data into SWIS, which is different than Power School. It's going into 2 different places. But we're able to generate so many more reports from SWIS that we look at. So we had a PBIS meeting this week. We looked at it, and we found 10 o'clock seems to be an area where we're seeing a spike in behaviors, and we feel that the students need maybe a brain break. So they've been in the classroom since 8:25, and they probably need to get up and do some movement. So that was really telling to look at that. And Monday seemed to be a more difficult day for when we look at days of the week. And we find that too for some of our students when they're coming back from a long weekend, it's hard to make that transition back to school. For the leadership and the citizenship goal, we feel we met that. The curriculum committee was established that we planned on. With that committee and working with Mrs. Murphy, they suggested ordering the book the first 6 weeks of school. You heard me talk about that in June. We ordered it, the teachers read it. We had book talks this summer. And we've implemented some of those strategies. Morning meeting has begun at Minot Forest, and that came from that book, the first 6 weeks of school, which is part of Responsive Classroom. What is nice is that it's building that sense of community in the classroom, and we have seen such a positive change with that. We had Chinese students visit last year as part of Global Literacy. We're expecting additional exchange students this year in December to meet that as well. We follow the Mass Maritime Follow the Voyage with the T.S. Kennedy, where the students were plotting where the ship was going, and they could comment on the blogs from the various cadets, and they had trivia questions that the students were able to respond to. And that worked, that was really great. Our technology teacher took the lead on that. We're going to be doing that again this year. We started our transitional support room. It's a regular education initiative. We didn't have it full-time last year, but it was a place where if there was some type of disruption to the learning, we could take the student out of the classroom. We saw that in the parent surveys, and we knew that we really need to focus on that. This year, our transitional support room is full-time. We have a paraprofessional working there. She's doing an amazing job with that. And having the full-time behavior interventionist has really been positive. So meetings that we've held with staff as well, they've shared the positive that they've seen, the changes that we've implemented. Just walking through the building, just that culture has just been great. So those are reviewing of the goals that we have, 216, 17. Do you have questions on that? not, I'll move on to the parent surveys. So I looked at, and you had mentioned this, Mr. Sweat, parents felt safe going to and from school. Last year, and it continues this year, the administrators greet the buses every morning. They get on the bus, they board the bus, and they're checking in with the bus driver. They're seeing how things are going. So we had that
Greatly appreciated.
instant feedback and communication, and I think you would hear that from the bus drivers as well. I looked at the question, not feeling safe in school, and I just referenced this, where some students were disrupting the learning, or maybe they were disrespectful. The TSR was helpful last year, but because it wasn't full-time, it wasn't consistent. It is consistent this year. So we've addressed that in this year's goals. We did lose an assistant principal this year, but having that structured program in the TSR and having that behavior interventionist really has been helpful. Feel valued and respected by peers, teachers, administrators. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing here. We feel that the morning meeting that we're doing in our classroom, which is 15 to 20 minutes every day, has really built that positive with the students. We do Student of the Week in a different way this year. Instead of reading the names over the intercom with our Friday morning announcements, we are delivering the Student of the Week certificates to the classroom, and we're asking the students, why do you feel that your classmate received this award this week? And they are coming up with reasons why they feel that they received it. Not just being respectful, responsible, and kind, which is our themes, but I'm hearing great things such as they helped a friend this week. They were holding open the door. So we're really getting that language going, and it has made an impact. We also started last year what we call the admin patrol, where we recognize students who always do the right thing, and that was another message that came from the parents last year. We focus so much on our high-risk students, and we have behavior charts. What about the kids that do the right thing? So we started the admin patrol. We pick a third grade and a fourth grade student. The administrators show up in the house on a Thursday or Friday afternoon, or wherever they are after school. It could be daycare, it could be the martial arts studio. We have a certificate, we have a balloon, and we have a pin that says Principal's Award. So we try to have the families keep it a secret. Obviously, we have to arrange it with the families. The students are thrilled, and we tell them to wear their pin every Friday. It started off really well. The kids loved it. This year we have a superhero theme at Minot Forest, so we started it last week because we wanted to get to know some of our students. And we showed up. If you look on the Minot Facebook page, we all are wearing our superhero capes. So we had 2 students who were so surprised, and that's just the highlight of our week. There's many highlights, obviously, but we love doing that. We also see that this, let me jump down, sorry. We saw in the surveys that they feel valued and respected by the administration team. We looked at schedules. We tweaked our schedules to make sure we're allowing for that instruction to happen. When you look at the professional staff surveys, some of the questions had a theme going, whether it was the leadership team, academics, or behavior. So when I looked at the behavior, it was very positive that we're implementing the TSR full-time. As I said, we've seen a big change with that. Having the behavior interventionist this year, that's all part of the goals that we have. We had expectations for the first 6 weeks of school, which is part of that book. So the teachers had to practice, practice, and practice. How do you walk down the hallway? How do you line up in the cafeteria? How do you line up for recess? And if you didn't get it right the first time, you practice it. That has made such a difference in the building as far as a positive culture. Staff are noting that. They're noting the positive atmosphere. We also have our guidance and our social workers that are working to support our teams. We have check-in, check-out with students, and we're also utilizing the Student Support Council. So teachers are referring students if they need additional strategies for those social, emotional things that come up during the day with students. We looked at academic things. Some of the positive, the innovative teaching practices that are encouraged. You mentioned that earlier, Mr. Sweat. Walkthroughs are showing that the leadership team is aware of what units are being taught. When I was walking through grade 4 this year, I was seeing expanded notation, place value. Our teachers were right there on pace with each other. We have programs that we are implementing for student behavior. We mentioned PBIS, the admin patrol. Last year, Mrs. Murphy did homework club for students who had difficulty doing homework. They could come to school in the morning and work with her on that. We have our K-Kids that we do. We have intramurals after school. It was great to see them now acknowledge that the leadership team is building trusting relationships with staff, because we really focus hard on that. The teachers appreciated being part of these new committees that we started last year, but we really are implementing this year. We're also this year sharing teaching strategies to improve instruction. So we heard all about the Boost program last year. Deacon's had the professional development with a literacy person. We have that has started this year. And because of their Boost program, we've started the intervention periods with intensive needs. We have students going to different teachers with very specific targeted instruction. And the PD person has helped us to develop that. We're very grateful for Mrs. Cote, who comes to us 2 days a week from the middle school to help with the academic piece. And we have found that to be such a positive this year. Also, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, my loss.
But we also have found that to be a real positive link between elementary and middle school. She's bringing some of the graphic organizers that they use up the 5th grade down to the 4th grade. So that has been great. And we'll be working on student exemplars and studying those high standards. Any questions on either the parent or the professional staff surveys?
Joan, you've done an excellent job in anticipating my question, but I'd like you to go into a little bit more detail about what is obviously a critical thing, which is parents' perception as to whether their kids feel safe at school. And the reason is because for 2016, 96% of the parents answered that question positively, and you had a 21-point drop, and the number of people responding to the survey was substantially more. So have you talked to parents about this? I mean,
yes, and we actually had a group of parents that met with me last year. They came in, they addressed their concerns, and we worked as a team on that.
What were their specific concerns?
So we had some students that were disrupting learning, and when that happens, we have to look as a school as why is that happening. And obviously I can't get into specifics, but there's a process that we follow for that. But we also wanted to make sure that the students weren't disrupting learning. So that's why we started the transitional support room.
I understand, but I guess, to me, remembering what it was like to be a student, if someone's disrupting the class, that never made me feel unsafe. I might have been annoyed, but it never made me feel unsafe. To me, is that what parents think is unsafe?
It depends on what the disruption is. So we do have students with social emotional needs who we worked throughout the year to identify supports they needed. Perhaps it was different programming, perhaps it was check in, check out with the guidance counselor. But if a student got upset and threw something on the floor, it may make a child feel anxious. And these were the families that I was hearing from. Some of the children were feeling anxious based on what they may have heard a student say or saw a student do. So we took that seriously, and again, that's why the transitional room has been very beneficial.
Was a child ever hurt by another child?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so this
because
is
we would
mostly-
remove the child right away.
So this was mostly anxiety, not actual harm?
A lot of anxiety. The child sometimes would, out of anger, maybe take a chair and just toss it aside, not at somebody. But a child who's 8 years old doesn't know what's going to happen.
I understand.
So,
Okay.
but we don't allow that to happen, and it was addressed not only through supports, but we follow the discipline code as well.
And emotional unsafety is the same as physical unsafety, and we have a lot of students with anxiety.
Yeah.
And we do have scuffles that happen on the playground and things where students do use hands, and again, we had to do.
And Minot had a even slightly lower score than Deacon's with respect to the parent asking the parent whether their child was ready for the, quote, next level, whatever that meant. It was about 25% of the parents didn't think their child was ready for the next level. How do you feel about that?
We had to do some explanation also with FAST, because just because it said their child was high risk didn't mean they were failing. So that was some of the misconceptions we found with some of the families when the FAST reports were coming out. But we also saw that there were some gaps and some students were behind. That's why we worked this year on developing those intensive interventions.
So if 8% is the correct number for DECUS, what do you think the correct number for Minot is?
Of
The students not prepared for the next level.
they're prepared, it's just the degree. So the teachers, like the third grade, we have third going into fourth. So the third grade teachers are working on all the standards and making sure they have covered everything they can. It's just the level of the students and what they've mastered. So everyone's been exposed to the same thing, they've been assessed, it's just a matter of their level of mastery. And then same with 4 going into 5.
I understand, but you do agree that when a parent thinks their child is not ready for the next level, that's a serious statement.
I had one parent that didn't feel her child was ready, even though we felt he was, and she wanted to have the child retained, so we had to work with her on that. But for the most part, sometimes when we recommend retention, the parents aren't always in agreement either.
Oh, I understand.
So it goes both ways.
Okay, thank you.
The last part that I will delve into are the MCAS scores. So Minot Forest doesn't get the accountability level because we did the next generation MCAS. But we do have a solid plan in place. When we looked at our scores, we met with the staff, we reviewed the data. So they have all of it in a Google Drive, everything you wanted to know and more about all the data with the students and what they've done as teachers, student growth percentile and so forth. We're looking more closely at the standards because the standards just changed again. So the staff now have binders, curriculum binders for the 2017 standards. We're looking at the student responses. Some of the information that we were able to get was what the students actually wrote for some of these questions. So we're examining that. We're looking at the MCAS questions to highlight what the priority standards are and where our focus will be this year. As I mentioned, we have the connection of the grade 4 to 5, so it's great having Mrs. Cote there to help us with that. Our special education staff have been actively engaged in these new interventions that we're implementing this year. They also were part of the inclusion committee where we placed the students appropriately on the teams when we felt that was a huge priority. The special ed teachers and the regular ed teachers have taken the co-teaching professional development this year. So they're working together on that, and the consultant came out and observed them working together. Mrs. Tobin holds monthly special ed case management meetings where we're looking at students and talking about strategies that we need to implement. She also meets with the paraprofessionals monthly, and they've been very grateful for the support and also for their voice to be heard and to make sure they have what they need as well. And we do have a posting out for a new special education teacher, so we're hoping to get that position to help with our special needs strategies that we have to implement. When we looked at the math scores, it's the second year that we're implementing the Envision program. We now have a pacing guide for the teachers to follow to make sure they're keeping on track, that they're not spending too much time on it, our unit. There's a scope and sequence that we've developed and we've shared with them. There's curriculum binders for math and ELA for them to follow. We've implemented topic benchmark assessments in Envision, so that's putting a lot of the multiple topics together. We're giving assessments online this year with their Chromebooks, so not only in math but also in ELA throughout the year. And what we're making sure we do also is have the accommodations for those particular assessments throughout the year. So MCAS, let's say a student on IEP, if they had a read aloud, we could order it so that with their Chromebook and the software, the question was read to them. So we're making sure that that happens this year as well as we go through. We're focusing not just on the program, because last year with the teachers having the program for the first year, they were so focused on getting through the units and learning the program itself that the focus this year is on the standard. We've already started having those conversations, what our students need. One of our math teachers in 4th grade said, I looked and I saw that I can combine these 2 particular lessons. Or some saw that particular lesson they can skip because it didn't fully address the standard that they needed to meet. So we're doing that, and this Tuesday's in service, they'll be delving more into that. Our schedules have been tweaked to allow 90 minutes for ELA and for math instruction. And we added math intervention back this year. So when we have these intensive intervention periods for our students who need to go out for ELA, the other students are going out for math intervention as well. We saw the scores and we knew we needed to do that. For ELA, grade 4 is using the same graphic organizer as grade 5, as I mentioned. We've developed the scope and sequence for the REACH program. Last May, we started addressing the new standards, and we're really working on that with the staff this year. They have their curriculum binders for ELA. We are utilizing the DESE writing standards in action for grades 3 and 4, so that's addressing some of the writing needs that we're seeing for our students. ELA assessments in REACH are being done online, and that's in grades 3 and 4. We have common standard-based assessments that we're giving each term. 90 minutes of ELA instruction, and as I mentioned, working with the consultant that was from DECUS. She's been great looking at our data with us and developing these specific things that the students need to do. We use FAST, we're using running records this year, we're using DRA, the various classroom assessments, and the students who are in our high needs group will be progress monitored twice during that 5-week intervention. We will look at the data, we'll look to see if they need to continue in that 5 weeks or if we need to change up the groups, and we will keep going throughout the year. But we also don't want to forget our high achievers. So in 4th grade, we have enrichment that's been scheduled during the same period as intervention. So it's at that last period at the end of the day. So some of the students can go to technology for enrichment, art for enrichment, phys ed, and we also have band during the day this year, which has really helped some of our students. More students can participate because it's held during the day, not before school, because some families couldn't drive their children to school. So yes, we looked at the data. Yes, we weren't happy with the results, but we have a solid action plan, as I've just mentioned, as we are moving forward this year, not only in regular education, but in special education, in math and ELA.
Yeah, me too. Go ahead, we'll start there.
So I just have a couple of questions. One of the question I have is, what would you say the average caseload is for your special ed teachers?
Anywhere from 23 to 25 students, but with this new position, we are looking to help ease that and to have some additional supports for some of our students.
Okay. And then you were talking about how you now also have the math intervention. So it happens during the same time when the ELA intervention is happening?
So we have targeted our high-risk students, the students who, those students that really need to have those interventions for ELA. That's our focus right now. And then the other students are going to math intervention. So because we're in teams, we've taken all the ELA teachers and we've spread the students out throughout their classes. We may have one of the ELA teachers that doesn't do an intervention group, so she's taking some of the students that don't have the high need areas. But then we also want to make sure we're addressing some of the math issues. So some of the students are going to math.
Okay, because many times you'll have a student that has both.
They're both.
Right.
We have to focus on one, so right now it's
Right.
the ELA. We have to make sure they can read so that they can read the math problem.
Right, oh, absolutely, I agree. And then the last question I have is, you talked about how you have, with some of the other students, the ones that are doing well academically, you have classes.
Enrichment
that
blocks.
Enrichment, that's the word I'm looking for, I'm lost. Been up since 6. So anyways, what about the struggling one student? So I'm also wondering, do they ever get any sort of
Yes,
opportunities?
some of them are participating in chorus.
Okay,
The interventions are Monday through Thursday in grade 3. Some of them can do the band on a different day. So, as you know, with schedules, we're always trying to tweak, and we want to make sure everybody has a whole group experience. So that is always something we're looking at. But band is only in grade 4 anyway.
Okay. All right, thank you.
In chorus.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I just want to quickly go back to the professional staff survey. It's interesting. The two questions related to knowledgeable leadership and evaluator support. Both Minot and Deacon's had low numbers in those areas, and the middle school and the high school had higher or very high numbers. And I'm wondering if it has to do with those people that you don't have called department heads.
I was just going to say, it really comes down to the number. Although we really work hard to do walkthroughs and observations,
But how
I'm sure
how
our
often-
numbers aren't equal.
So
They're not equal.
I understand
No.
that. How often would you say, not yourself, because all of you are trying to get into every classroom some number of times, but the supervising evaluator, how often are they getting into the classrooms?
They were doing at least 10, would you say, Mrs. Murphy, on a teacher, on an average? At least 10 throughout the year, even more.
Really?
Yes.
We're in a classroom a lot more. We're in the classrooms almost every day to do a 10-minute walkthrough.
I understand.
Yes. And then they will write up an observation, and they're giving plenty of feedback, suggestions, and
Because when 40% of the professional staff don't think there's knowledgeable leadership, that makes me wonder, because I'm sure that you and Mrs. Murphy are not lacking in knowledge. So
Right.
somehow they're not seeing it, they're not feeling it, and they're not feeling evaluator support.
And sometimes we want to give constructive feedback that may not always, maybe the staff don't agree with that.
That's
So it depends on
different.
how they read the question.
I agree that can be an issue, there's no question about it. But that's technically not what the question was asking. But with respect to SGPs, which is what I primarily look at, and don't laugh, but I have 10 years of data sitting right here next to me. I know you had a blip in math, but given the fact that you had very good results for the last 4 years, and the last 5 years have been a whole lot better than the previous 5 years, I want you to know I think you've got things under control, and I'm sure it's just one data point, and I'm not concerned about it. So
I agree.
and I think ELA is the same way. I think the progress there over the last 10 years has been very clear. So I want to congratulate you, you and your team on it.
Thank you. And I do want to point out that in grade 4 English, our SGP was higher than the state.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd also like to add at this time that I know a lot of the progress that has been made from the ground up, and I think a lot of it started with changing that master schedule for that common planning time for teachers to be able to talk to each other, plan together, have the teams. And just like I said when I heard Deacon's report, when I look at the surveys, I look at how are they addressing the problems that were there. And I applaud your achievements, and they are many. And I feel like you have been right on top of addressing any problems that were there. And I'd also like to say, our system has been giving these surveys to the parents and the teachers, but we didn't even have to make them, the data, public, and we choose to. So I think we're doing a good job that way too.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Does anyone else have a question before we move on?
Comfortable? You need to rotate.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for letting me be here this evening. It's my opportunity, and I also want to thank my admin team, who is here as well, for support. My report is on page 48. I would like to present the information to you and then also be very happy to answer questions. Looking at the goals first for 16 and 17. The SIP goal really focused, the first one focused on student-centered experiences, and the key word in there is dispositions and increasing opportunities available for teachers to develop a variety of instructional strategies. So the key action steps that we took to make this happen was that observations focused on efficient and effective use of technology in class. So many firsts last year for the middle school. First time Envisions was used school-wide. Specific teachers had piloted the program previously, but this first time we used it in its entirety. First time every student used a Chromebook. The first time 7th and 8th grade could take it home, and the first time all MCAS was done on a Chromebook. And writing days were done on computer, and common school-wide assessments were also completed. So it was key in all of the data that we conducted through our observations was how was that technology being used, and was it being used effectively, and what ways could we tweak our models to ensure that our students would be ready to use that technology effectively and safely. The key component with the curriculum guides for us was the fact that we created a committee starting in January to pursue whether we were going to become an international baccalaureate middle years program school. Took a number of months, but the committee decided to move forward with that. And that had a direct impact on the development of our curriculum guides. Dr. Schwamb has created a curriculum guide that, of course, covers the Massachusetts state standards. It's Warehamized, so it reflects our community, but it also closely aligned with the International Baccalaureate model. And with that in mind, we started to develop those curriculum guides with focus work in the spring, primarily looking at community involvement and community partnerships. We started last year, but also knowing that there was room to grow. As we saw from the parent survey, 78% of the parents thought we were involved with the community. I'm sure probably on their mind was our amazing work with the bogs, the moving wall with the direct partnerships with the veterans community, and also we have a very active and passionate school council. We also implemented Viking time for social and emotional wellness. We had cyberbullying presentations. We developed a Safe School Alliance that came organically from students. And we started a 3-year commitment with PBIS, which we are calling Viking Strong, which is implemented in the building for the first time this fall. In conclusion, for Unit 1, we felt we met our goals, primarily focusing on the unit plans, and these are going to be continued to be updated. We have a professional development in a few days, and those will continue to be evolving over time. Goal number 2 focused on looking at the assessment system, and again, going through the process of gaining MYP was crucial for us, but we also wanted to make sure that our assessments were being analyzed and put in place into our curriculum guides. We wanted to make sure that we would embed the system of assessment to make sure that, as we talked about the last time we met with as a school committee, looking at planning backwards, having the end in mind, what we hope students will accomplish in the end as a summative assessment, and build backwards to find out what the skills need to be cultivated in grade 5. Having the MYP also influenced our professional development opportunities as a number of staff were sent for MYP training. We also had competency-based practices occurring with Envision. We evaluated online resources, primarily Lexia and Try Engineering. We also feel that we met the SIP goal for number 2. The third goal looks at leaders will create a safe, student-centered environment that engages students beyond the traditional classrooms, and that the learning experience will be vibrant, principled, and caring. With a focus, we felt also on 21st century skills. And with that, the main focus last year was focused primarily on the 3 skills in the 21st century of collaboration, technology, and globalism. And innovative learning. As you've mentioned already tonight, we feel that our faculty really tries to take risks, and we support them in that with amazing work that they've done. The entire math curriculum, as we talked about, was entirely online. We allow for that technology to occur, but also we get our kids' hands dirty with bog work. We introduced Viking Time, which fostered collaboration in small teams. the one-on-one technology and the development of academies. Remember, last year was the first time we had the Humanities Academy for grade 7, which encouraged our students to take a more global view and look at their 7th grade curriculum through the lens of the humanities. We were very pleased with the community partnerships that were established. We also looked at qualitative data through experiences with an unbelievable science fair, team building in our academies and in Viking time, and also the great 21st century skill of making our students active community members with the creation of a Safe School Alliance. We believe we met our goals, but only in the fact that they inform the direction where we're moving now. Before I move on to the surveys, does anyone have any specific questions about the 3 goals?
No.
Okay. So looking at the parent survey first. We are pleased that on page 50, there's an indication that there's a rise, and I believe my child or children has at least one adult at school who knows him or her well and assists him in achieving his or her goals. I found that a very powerful statement, and something that our community really believes in, that our teachers really focus on building relationships, and that came through to the parents. Also, I was excited to see that parents believe that teachers encourage their children to work hard and achieve high in all subjects, and that their children feel valued and respected. Really important for me, that the kids feel respected by their teachers, by their counselors, and administration. Pleased with that. That being said, we also had looked at the data and looked that there was some room for growth, primarily what can we do to foster a love of school in the students, with the idea that on page 50, I feel that my child enjoys school. Well, we want every student not only to enjoy school, but to downright love school. So what are we doing to make sure that happens? We also want, as been discussed already this evening, we want our students to feel emotionally and physically secure at school. And so the real launch of the Viking Strong initiative this year has to really set those expectations for our community, and something that the faculty have worked with since day one this year. This is where we have the standard for your behavior. This is what we expect of you, but also with the idea that when we ask a student to behave in a certain way, that those expectations are followed, and if not, that there are going to be consequences for that. And that's supported by administration. As I mentioned previously, we were also pleased that there seems to be some in the high 70s, close to 80, that there's some community involvement with communication. Although I was pleased with that number, I still felt there was room for growth with community outreach and community communication. I received some honest feedback from parents who said, Pete, the phone calls, the all calls home, they're okay, but they're excessive, and you seem to do them right during when the Patriots are playing. So I understand. I've tried to diversify my messages. I've tried to diversify in terms of doing more texts. I opened up a middle school Facebook page that is a way to outreach to parents, and also the use of email and phone calls. So knowing that the communication will never be 100%, that there will always be, particularly in our line of work and particularly with technology, there's always going to be parents, and rightfully so, they're going to want to know more. But I hope that we'll see numbers in that area improve. Does anyone have any specific questions about the parent survey?
You're going to laugh, but when I looked at the parent survey I thought of William Golding's Lord of the Flies. And because it would appear from the parent survey that the reason they don't enjoy school is because of their peers. That 25% of them feel disrespected and not valued by their peers. So if we could just, get rid of the students and have them handled one-on-one by the teachers, we'd be just fine, But in all seriousness, I'm sympathetic, and and I actually, believe it or not, despite my advanced age, remember middle school. I guess I agree with you 100%. The fact that the parents think there's at least one person in that school that really means a lot to their child is critically important. I mean, that's basically 9 out of 10 of the kids feel that way. I think you take that away from especially a middle school kid, I think you've got a bunch of lost kids. And so I applaud the fact that people feel that way and parents are willing to say that. It's also true in the high school, but your rating is almost as high as the high school. So I think it's something your staff and you should feel very proud of. I wish more kids felt safe in school. And I wish more than about 25% of them, parents didn't think their kid wasn't ready to go to Mr. Palladino's outstanding high school. But fortunately, when they get there, they find out they're ready, because they do flourish there. So I think it's more psychological than real, but I still think it's probably part of the anxiety about moving on.
And the tremendous growth that happens from grade 5 to grade 8. It's unbelievable. We have middle school parents on them, right? It's unbelievable. So, in terms of being ready, are they ready academically? Are they ready socially? Are they ready emotionally?
And I know personally 2 kids who are in the dual enrollment program. They started out nervous Nellies, and now it's the best thing they've ever done. And of course, it prepares them tremendously for when they go on to the high school. And both of them have decided to go on to this, our high school, as compared to other places. So I think it's accomplished a number of really positive things. So I applaud both you and Mr. Palladino for making that work.
Yeah, and as we've discussed, this year is the highest number of students participating in that program.
Now, am I correct? Did you actually turn a small number away?
Well, we turned a large number away.
Oh, okay. A small number the year before, but a lot. So
Correct.
How many? It's almost like getting into college, getting into Wareham High School as an 8th grader. What percentage did you end up turning away?
I'd say my estimate would be about 20% of the applicants.
So you took about 40 some?
45. And there were about 60 some odd applicants.
Wow. Okay.
Mr. Sweat, can I also address the issue about the peers? Right? And
Yes.
I think the purpose of having Viking block being flexible is allowing for those Viking time lessons, but also I know that the conversations on how you interact with your peers, I know it's happening in English, it's happening in math, it's happening in science with group work. So I know the teachers are giving explicit instructions, which we really felt the need to do. This is how you walk down the hallway. This is how you engage with your peers at lunch. So we want to be explicit with our expectations. And that's really been embraced by staff this year, knowing that we as a school were competing against a variety of very powerful images and messages on how we conduct ourselves in polite society. So it is our job, it is our duty to make sure the kids know how to agree and disagree respectfully. And we are using the same 2 words, respect and responsible, as Deaconess and Minot. And we had a change for the 3rd one. We want them to be thoughtful, not only with their academic work, but develop some sense of empathy. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions about the parent survey? Yes, ma'am.
Well, it actually has to do with the dual enrollment. Can I ask something about dual enrollment?
Sure.
So how did you make the decision to what children could participate and what children could not?
Well, we have a rubric that we use, and it's been, I think it's been proven to be pretty accurate in regards to the students that we deem that could be successful in the program. And if the student reaches a certain number in that rubric, we offer them a spot in the dual enrollment. If they don't, unfortunately, there's only so many spots in the program. So that's kind of, this is our 4th year, and we've had, I think, some good success in regards to evaluating the student's application and identifying students that could be successful in the program.
Could you, at some point, share that rubric with us? I'd be curious to see it.
Sure, absolutely, and it's, I believe it's on the website, but certainly if it's not, we could definitely share it with you.
Okay. And then one last question about it, and again, I've asked it before, and I'm sure you probably don't have it with you, but the percentage of children that are on IEPs?
It's higher than you would think, but
Okay.
I'd certainly want to go back and double check, but, you know, we don't really even, we're not like a vocational school that would ask that question. So we really have no way of pre-identifying that, but certainly once they're in the program, obviously there's accommodations that are made for those students. So I could certainly get that number for you, but I know there are a few that are on IEPs, and they always, they're always just as successful as their peers.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
May I just speak on that?
Sure,
I
please.
was part of the interviewing process last year of the dual enrollment. It's pretty authentic. So the rubric is created, but the questions, you're not looking at any past information. You're not, you're there and you're meeting students and you're asking them a set amount of questions, taking notes, and it's quite a wonderful experience, actually, to get to know them, and the way that they answer questions is pretty dynamic. The questions are really interesting. So it's not about what you would think. It's not collecting past information and materials and all of that. It's really a personal experience with each student that walks through the door.
Okay.
It was really quite lovely.
So you don't look at their academic past at all?
So there's
didn't.
roughly 8 pieces that we weigh, and certain things have more weight than others, but certainly academic past is one of approximately 8 areas that we review. And they're all different point values. So I think probably the best thing to do is I'll send Dr.
That'd be
Shaver
great.
with the rubric and have her pass that along.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to see if you could send it to everybody, that'd be interesting.
All of us.
Absolutely.
Right, now moving on to the
I
faculty.
just wanted
Oh,
to
sorry, yeah.
note one thing I noted when I was looking at this, whether the scores went up a little or down a little, for the most part, the approval rating is, almost all of them are in the 80%, in that 80 band, and that's pretty high in itself. So you might have gone down lower 80s or higher 80s, but I mean, to have so consistently, if you look at that column,
Yeah.
majority of them are in the 80s.
Hoping for higher,
Okay.
working for higher. Thank you, though. The faculty survey, as my colleagues in the other schools have mentioned, it's an extremely important document for me after my first year and for my leadership team. It's something that we pored over when we received the results in June. As you know, it's a sobering experience, no doubt about it. So, although we are pleased that, as you mentioned, Mr. Sweat, the innovative teaching practices are encouraged, some very high numbers there, and that teachers and the leadership team work together to ensure that instructional units are continuously improved to support student learning, goes along with the goals that we feel that we really accomplished building in those instructional units. But I'm here tonight to really look at some of those areas for growth. There's no doubt that I made some significant missteps in my first year as principal of an amazing school. I really always consider myself that I am the proud principal of an amazing school. So looking at the data, there is no doubt that the faculty felt that I did not communicate my vision effectively. They recognize that there's little time to collaborate as a faculty. There's a sense also the faculty needed me and my administrative team to be much more of a presence in the hallways to address behaviors right away, either in the hallways or in the classroom. And also to try to identify students even more so who are falling behind. And we have an SSC program in place. I meet with the counselors every Friday with the social worker, with the behaviorist. But we need to, there's a feeling amongst faculty that there are some kids who are falling behind, and we need to identify them and try to figure out ways to get them ready. There's also a feeling that I need to build stronger relationships with the faculty. So all of those things I really thought deeply about over the summer. So what was I going to do to make sure that I addressed those concerns? We shared the faculty results to the faculty a few weeks ago. We also wanted to make sure that they understood that we took their feedback seriously. So, and their feedback influenced my work this summer, our work this summer, and our goals. So it was a sense that the teachers wanted and they deserved more autonomy. And we talked a little bit about that the last time I was here, talking about that Viking block, that giving them the sense that they could control that block to provide interventions, to provide a Viking time lesson, or to provide enrichment. But to plan that, they needed collaboration time, which we've offered them after school. They also were looking for more initiatives to support behavioral issues. So this year with Rachel's Challenge, I wanted to make sure that we didn't just have that powerful presentation, then leave it. We had that amazing presentation, we had chain reaction, but then we followed it up with a Viking time lesson where teachers could engage in their students in small groups to talk about what does it mean to accept Rachel's Challenge, to be more empathetic and compassionate to our community. With the Viking Strong initiative, that's how we run PBAS, making sure that students understand what it means to be responsible, respectful, and thoughtful. Right now, the students are actually creating videos about what it means to embrace those values in their Viking time. We also wanted to make sure that leadership was distributed. So we had created a number of professional learning communities that are completely faculty run, administration are not involved, because this came from the fact that these are issues that are concerning to us and we want to work together as a collective unit to address them. So the PLCs right now include an anti-bullying PLC. One is on the International Baccalaureate, one is specifically geared towards assessment, and the other one is to ensure that Viking Strong never loses that momentum. Our hope is that my communication with faculty, whether it's my weekly email, whether it's making sure that I'm a continued presence in their faculty, in the classroom, but also making sure that I have an open door policy and making sure that on Tuesday afternoon, any faculty member, if they wish, can come and see me and raise concerns. I'm there for them. I want my communication to be transparent, and we also want to make sure that we as an admin team are continuing our walkthroughs to know that they are supported and that we are a presence to them. Finally, in terms of specific programs as well to address disruptive behavior, as I mentioned last time, we have now implemented junior ROTC in the Viking block. We are exploring peer mediation with our counselors. And then, as you probably have read about, we have morning yoga for a number, almost 45 sixth graders in the morning now as a pilot program to have them start off their day. Following with what they're doing in DECUS, I also have sort of a mantra that I say about how we are respectful, responsible, and thoughtful to everyone in our building. Does anyone have any specific questions about the faculty survey?
Go ahead.
There are a number of questions that use the term leadership. How do you think the people who answered that question defined leadership? Meaning, was leadership synonymous with the principal? Was leadership the principal and the assistant principals? Was leadership the assistant principals, principal, department heads, deans, etc.? How do you think that was defined, and do you think it should have been defined before the question was answered?
It's a good question. I think that, talking about my misstep, I think that was a missed opportunity on my part, not to define it more clearly.
So you think it varied depending on who was answering the question?
In my opinion, I believe it varied. So when they're in terms of, I'd imagine in terms of when they're talking about discipline, they're talking about my APs and my deans who are in charge of discipline. When it may be a curricular issue, that could be every one of us because we're all evaluating, but maybe that's really geared towards the department head. But we did not do an effective job before that survey went out to say, this is when you're answering this question, this is what we mean by leadership. So I think the results are the results. I mean, I think it's clear that the faculty has spoken on that, and we need to address that. But I think we need to do a better job in terms of explaining who that is. So one thing that we're doing this year is we're not waiting until the end of the year to gather feedback. We just asked the faculty to fill out another survey now, really focused on issues surrounding discipline. Have they seen any movement? Have we moved the needle at all in terms of that?
The collaboration question is an interesting one, because your colleague, Mrs. Seamans, went from a weakness in 2016 to a strength. It was a 50-point jump, which is an extraordinary jump. It was such a high jump that I literally asked Dr. Schwamb and whether it was a typo, whether it was bad data, because you don't get 50-point jumps. But in fact, a specific thing had been done to enhance collaboration at Minot Forest. I suspect, and you don't need to answer yes or no, but you may have asked your colleagues, how are you getting such high scores and why am I getting such a low score? Do you think there's something very specific you can do to achieve the kind of results your colleagues are getting in this collaboration area?
Well, I think the key element is time. That last year they didn't have those opportunities to engage in those conversations.
Because the time was being used for a different purpose?
For different purposes. Right? So
We still need more.
we still
need more time.
We still need more. But our hope is we've allocated.
I don't think that's unique to Wareham.
No. We allocated a little bit more time with the idea that so it's not just once a month when you're having an opportunity to engage with your colleagues in the math department or even in your grade level, that the conversation needs to be ongoing. So we've allowed with greater frequency that opportunity.
I do want to say that I cringed when you said they want more autonomy, because when I hear autonomy, I think silos. And silos to me are anathema. That is not the way we grow as professional people. So you're not really saying they want autonomy as in leave me alone and don't walk in my classroom. What do you mean by autonomy?
Sure. So the message about Viking block this week is not coming from on high, that you must have a Viking block lesson on Monday, you must spend 47 minutes on it, you must put these kids in this intervention. Those teachers know those kids. And it's empowerment. Right. It's not autonomy. Yeah. So giving, because
I much prefer Mrs. Cote's word.
Yeah.
And a voice, the voice.
Okay, but you agree with Mrs. Cote's word?
Absolutely.
Much better word. Okay, good. Thank you.
I just want to say something while it's in my mind. I know when I met you last year, I was asking you, well, I have to preface this by saying I spent 36 years in middle school, so I saw a lot of changes. But I know one part that was important to me, and I was asking you if you had this, was a master schedule that supported common planning time for teachers, because that's what I felt really moved the school forward. And I wanted to ask you if there has been any change in this.
If there is an opportunity for common planning time, it's very much a happy accident that occurs based on the planning that is done by Sandy Ponton and Tracy Cote. So the hope is that we'd have more, but really in terms of a budget. Sorry.
Sometimes it's not always budget. I know what you're saying, because when you do that, then you have to have more teachers to teach the classes that those teachers aren't teaching. I totally understand it. But what I am asking right now, I know when we had to do it, we had a consultant come out and look at everything for us. I don't know did the teachers say that that's very important to them? Is that something that would be a very high priority to teacher moving your school forward? Or Andrea, what do you think about this too? Is that an area?
It's clearly a budgetary issue.
Clearly, okay.
Clearly.
You would know how to change the schedule.
There is no other way around it. They have been asked to perform with less every single year. So if you you begin to chip away, what that does is it it doesn't leave you any wiggle room with the time that you have. So you try to find, and they've been very creative. They've gone above and beyond looking, there's no
I've
box.
met the teachers,
They've
I
looked
believe that. yes.
everywhere. And, they've given up other times. Like the weekly principal meetings, for example, they split them out. So the principal meets once a month, and those other meetings happen with colleagues. They'll either do a PLC, or they'll have department meetings specific, or data meetings, but they have to use the time, and it's constricted by the contract as well, so you have to honor the contract. And without the necessary amount of personnel, we'll take it from wherever we can get it, but that's really the bottom line.
That's what I thought, that schedule is impeding some of the progress that we would like to see. And and the second comment, it's a comment. Pete, you took the fall for everyone.
Sorry?
You took the fall for everyone. When you were speaking of leadership, you just totally spoke about yourself. That's all.
Well, I'm a Midwesterner.
Yes.
So, Truman's kind of a hero of mine.
Okay.
It's shared. I have very close relationships with my admin team. I have deep respect for them.
As you should.
But in the end, as I've said a number of times, the buck stops here.
Okay.
So if there's an issue in the survey, if there's an issue in the school, it's my issue to address.
Okay. Mary?
I was just wondering when, obviously it stands out that disruptive behavior is a concern amongst the staff. And I'm just wondering if you've looked into any sort of alternatives to suspension, because I know the state is looking very closely at the suspension rate, so we're apt to not use suspension as a discipline. And in my experience, it doesn't work anyways, because many times you have students that like it because they get to stay home and all of that. And just as an example, I was actually at a SEL, social emotional learning workshop not too long ago, and it was interesting. There were people from Martha's Vineyard, and by the way, the superintendent there is a former Wareham person. That's right. And what they're doing or trying right now is the students have a choice in school suspension or working on a farm out there in Martha's Vineyard that they have a partnership with. So that's one example. And then another one that I've actually been toying with and trying to figure out how it would even work, because I'm looking into it in my district that I'm working in now, is having repeat offenders have to attend some type of academy. And, this is something that I've just started thinking about. And what would this academy look like? I don't know, but I think of other situations where, even in the adult world, that offenders have to attend a type of academy or something that addresses their offense. So I'm just wondering if you've any thoughts about looking into things like that.
We talk about discipline a great deal. One thing which is clear, we follow the handbook. So, if that's a suspendable offense, it's a suspendable offense. We're really trying to focus this here and trying to be proactive, though, before that gets to that point. So we are really working with our social workers. We have a social work intern. We have now Gosnold coming 1 day a week in terms of helping students manage some of those impulsive behaviors that might lead to trouble. We added a dean of students, so like the other school mentioned, they've got one administrator per grade to try to sort of stave off any issues that might occur. So we're really taking that tack yet. I mean, as an admin team, we have started to consider peer mediation, right, on some type of restitution, but that's only the beginning stages. At this stage, we really believe that we spent a lot of work with our school council on the handbook, and so making sure that that is followed to a T is really important to us.
Okay, thank you. It just you know you're still going to have students, even though you're being proactive, that are going to not respond.
Sure.
Okay.
Don't say that.
That's our challenge.
But, so I'm just saying, I think it's important you do also look into alternatives for suspension that may be more effective.
Any other questions about the faculty survey?
I guess my only question was going to be about following up before the end of the year. So you did answer that by saying, so that's, and will that be just at the middle school, or will that be everywhere?
We're planning on having, through our school council,
Mhm.
3 surveys as well within school.
Okay,
just
good.
During each term.
Mhm. Okay.
Actually have 2. Is it a mandatory survey, so it's 100% teacher and admin compliance?
How it's set up is it's offered at a time, and then we send it out and request that faculty meeting time is given for the survey, so that they don't have to take it outside of their school day, that is part of the school day, and we have received 100% participation. So if a faculty member's not there, the principal or assistant principal will follow up and make sure that that survey is complete.
Without any further questions, I'd like to finish my conversation tonight about MCAS and our results. Although we are extremely pleased with the growth that we saw in ELA, and that has a lot to do with the collaboration and leadership of our teams and the incredible work by the special education staff and the co-teaching model that we have with Ms. Breeze and Ms. Frame. We are really pleased with that growth. We do recognize, looking at the math scores, that we also recognize we need to improve. In ELA as well, but math is certainly an area of focus. We are concerned that progress has not been made in math in certain areas for a number of years. As I already mentioned, we are in the 2nd year of the program, and we are looking forward to learning that program and in a nuanced way to continue to grow from that. We will continue to promote best practices of our teachers who have seen growth over the past few years. We are also currently adjusting time in professional development to make sure that there is focus on content and skills in a more focused manner. We'll be working in partnership with the math department in the high school so we can explore future collaboration opportunities. How will we know if this initiative is working? Well, I think what we'll really be doing is focusing on data throughout the year, with benchmark assessments that are given by every teacher in every grade level, that follows a pacing guide that was developed with our work with DSAC last year to make sure that they focus when those benchmarks are given. The first one of those benchmark tests are actually given November 13th and 14th. Our belief also is that teachers will gain greater familiarity with the pacing as it relates to Pearson. So even gaining that familiarity and that comfort level with how they're instructing the math as it relates to the Pearson program. The great thing about the benchmarks, and given at that time, is that we can compare the benchmarks with the grades given in that quarter. And the belief is that we will be able to track the progress, and as our focus will be on the standards, we will make sure that our teachers and even the students understand what standards are being assessed throughout the year. The FAST data that's already been mentioned by my colleagues tests specific math skills. We're also going to be using that FAST data. It's given 3 times a year. So we are going to triangulate and using the benchmarks, FAST data, MCAS, in having specific interventions with teachers that might need some extra support, and also working closely with the department chair to ensure that they gain that support. We really felt that the writing days implemented last year, and we just had one recently in ELA, allow the students to gain that sense of confidence and familiarity with that experience. And the hope is that we can have similar experiences with our students in mathematics. And so that's being planned right now. My hope is that we can turn the corner, and that with these specific interventions, targeted interventions, we'd be able to do that. As I mentioned last time, the fact that we have a flexible groupings in Viking block will allow for special education interventions to go above and beyond, but also interventions by math teachers as they're gathering that data, and English teachers as they're gathering that data throughout the year to allow for more targeted interventions. I'm open for your questions about the MCAS scores. Ms. Morgan. Oh, sorry.
So I'm going to ask the same question I asked Joan. What do you think the caseload is for your special ed teachers?
Yeah, it really depends in terms of when we talk about special education teachers, or we're talking about the teachers who are in the ASD room, separate.
Inclusion.
I mean, we've got
inclusion.
Per class, it's 25, right?
25 to 30, could be over 30.
Okay.
The percentage overall is 25.5% special education in the middle school.
That's a different question.
No, I'm asking
but
about
I'm
the
just saying that-
caseload. Yes, I understand, it's high.
But the level
Right.
is extremely, it's higher than it's been in a long
Right.
time. So,
Right, no, I understand.
yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, I understand it's high, and that's why we need more support. Then the other question I had was, wasn't there a science?
Yeah. Go ahead, Tracy. No, go ahead.
You don't have SGPs in science, it's only the ELA now.
Okay. All right, I think that's it, thank you.
I have a question of, what is the data team? Who's on the data team? I think I might have missed an explanation along the way with that one.
Sure. So data team is comprised of those teachers within that subject area. I guess it depends what data we're looking
like
at.
the subject area, like
Subject
a PLC?
area. So yeah. So
A type of PLC? No.
that's different than the PLC. PLC only. I'm sorry if I was not clear. The PLC meets once a month, and that grew out of specific areas that faculty wished to focus on. So one of those areas was assessment.
Mm-hmm.
That's happy to, and then one is on the IB, another one's on Viking Strong. When looking at data team meetings, looking at FAST data, or looking at MCAS data, looking at common assessments, looking at the writings, we have a common time next week looking at to grade the writing day that just happened.
So teachers, the educators meet according to discipline?
Correct.
I have a question for you, Dr. Stedman, but maybe I'll ask all four principals, well, certainly three of the principals. Do you think parents know what SGPs are? We throw that term around a whole lot because certainly I think it has great value as compared to CPI and proficiency and all that kind of stuff. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of SGPs is literally everybody in the state at the same level is compared to how much they grow. And so if a teacher gets a child, whether it's at the 80% level or the 30% level, they're only judged about how much they grow from that point. And by definition, a score of 50 means they've grown an average amount based on the entire student body of the state. So any number over 50 means you're doing well, as compared to 50% on a test, which means you haven't done well. So my question to you, Dr. Stedman, is, do you agree that SGPs are a valuable insight into the performance of a school?
It is but one measure that we should look at.
But you do agree it's worth looking
I think
at?
absolutely worthwhile to look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, if you were a school committee member, what other measurements would you look at?
Sure. So primarily related to MCAS, or?
No, you said it's one measure, and you're right, it's one measure.
So I think graduation rates, I think attendance rates are worthwhile looking at. I think looking at discipline trends over time. This kind of data as well in terms of getting feedback from
Okay.
faculty. It's just one measure, but
Fair enough.
it's an important one. I'm not going to disagree.
And how many years of SGP data do you think it takes for it to be really meaningful? In other words, I said to your colleague, yes, she had a blip in math for 1 year. I don't look at one data point as meaningful at all, whether it's positive or negative. I don't look at it as meaningful. How many years of SGP data do you think we as school committee members should look at as a serious trend?
I'd say 3 to 5 years, but that would sort of start the conversation. So you'd have to look at that time and saying, what was the population of that cohort? And so was there teachers moving around? Are we talking about the same teacher teaching that same group?
Ideally, that would be the case.
Ideally, that would be the case,
Yes.
right? Not always the case.
Not
But
always
ideally,
the
that's
case. But of course, we're comparing it to kids all over the state who start at the same point, so.
Yeah, so I'd say 3 to 5 years will give you some insight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have an Andrea question. The next generation MCAS, you can't compare those scores to the past MCAS. Am I correct, or can you still?
You are absolutely correct. The
So-
state has indicated
Right.
that clearly they call the growth transitional growth at this point because it's sort of similar if you look at the third grade MCAS, there's no growth score because there aren't 2 years of data points in order to look at the students that took it at one point to the next. The first time you actually see SGP is in grade 4. We have a brand-new test with completely different expectations. The state has admitted so. We are at ground zero, basically.
I was just going to say, the
We are
word's
starting-
ground zero.
We are starting
definitely.
over. And I think that that's not a bad thing. But I also don't think that the information that we have